How did this abandoned lot and crumbling building lead me to find out about the next hotspot of Miami? First, let me explain where this building even is. This building is located here, and I was walking by it as I was exploring the area between Wynwood and Brickell. For those who don't know, Brickell is Miami's financial district, and Wynwood is Miami's art district. Both have tons of great restaurants, are full of nightlife, and generally speaking, they're two of the biggest hotspots in Miami, along with, of course, South Beach. This area in between doesn't look anything like Brickell or Wynwood, though. It seemed, well, somewhat neglected. Okay, back to the building and the lot. I took this picture as I was walking by because I just thought it looked cool. But later on, when I looked at it again, I couldn't help but notice this sign. What caught my attention was the $1.25 million that were supposedly at work here. This lot didn't seem like much, so what the hell did that money get spent on here? I decided to check out the website to see if I could figure it out. This is where things began to take an interesting turn. I pretty quickly found out that this seemingly desolate area didn't always look like this. Quite the opposite, actually. This area is called Overtown, and Overtown dates all the way back to Miami's inception in 1896. Back then it was called Colored Town since it was the only part of the city where black residents were allowed to live. But by the middle of the 20th century, Overtown grew to become a major hub for black businesses and culture. There were hotels, restaurants, and nightclubs where entertainers like Ella Fitzgerald, Billie Holiday, Sam Cooke, and Louis Armstrong would perform. Overtown was thriving so much that it became known as the Little Broadway, or Harlem of the South. So what the hell happened? How did Overtown go from this to what it is today? From what I was able to find, things in Overtown started to decline around the 1950s. The biggest driver behind that was development. With funding from President Eisenhower's Federal Aid Highway Act in the 1960s, local government in South Florida decided to start expanding the highway system. And one of the areas they chose to do that in was, you guessed it, Overtown. Look at this map of Overtown from 1950 to 1962. In that time, you can see two perpendicular highways built right in the middle of the neighborhood. Take a listen to this first-hand account I found of a man who was an Overtown resident while this all was happening. They were being displaced. I think they called it urban renewal. Here he's talking about what local officials called a development that was pushing out his fellow residents. He goes on to say, I'm sure they talked about it, but that was kind of slipped in that they were going to build a highway. They said they were going to build a highway through, but no one knew it was going to destroy the community as it did. So what does all this have to do with what's going on in Overtown today? Well, as you might imagine, a lot of people were really upset about what became of Overtown after the highways were built. Again, this wasn't an empty neighborhood. This was one of the preeminent black communities in the entire US at the time. Now, for anyone who's familiar with historically disenfranchised areas, the arc of this story is probably pretty familiar to you. Some major event or development changes the landscape of an area, people are forced out, the area declines, and the rest is history. However, that's not how the story of Overtown ends. Even though proposals and efforts to revitalize the area kept falling short, people kept trying. The latest proposal came in 2019, and this time it seems like progress is actually being made. Okay, you wouldn't know from this site, but around other parts of Overtown, things are already starting to look up. There's new housing, new restaurants, and there's a ton more in the works too. There's plans to build a boutique hotel, at least 5 more restaurants, art studios, and a nightclub called Harlem Square, which is set to be built right here. Now wait, I know what you're gonna say. I thought the same thing. Isn't this new wave of development gonna push out the current residents of Overtown just like it did last time? Well, no. At least not according to the executive director of the community agency that's overseeing the development. He told me in an email that they're implementing a housing plan to ensure that no long-term resident of Overtown is forced out. They've also been investing in improving living conditions for current residents, and they're making a job creation program for locals too. Now obviously it remains to be seen if all of this will prevent residents from being displaced or priced out, but this at least makes me hopeful. The most hopeful part about all this though is that this doesn't appear to be just another major development project where money is the only motivating factor. Instead, the vision is about bringing Overtown back to what it was in its heyday. A bustling neighborhood, a thriving business district, and above all, the heart and soul of one of Miami's oldest communities.